We've had a look at PDCA already, so I don't want to actually spend a lot of time on the plan, do, check, act. Very, very important, very vital for Agile working and Agile tool set, because it's all about the iteration. It's all about the incremental development, continuous integration, and continuous delivery of your software so that it is actually better and improved over a period of time. So PDCA, needless to say, very important. We spent a lot of time on this already, I think last week as well. So I'll move on to the next one, which is the Agile Toolkit. So there's something called as DMAIC, which is very popular, made popular by the lean manufacturing back in the 80s, and I think even in the 80s and 90s from Toyota manufacturing, and it started with that, and then of course it was adopted into the Agile development framework within the lean processes. So it's basically a good tool set for you to understand how to go about doing the aspect of continuous improvement. When you say, how do you do that? That's through the application of DMAIC. So you define, you measure, and then you analyze, and then you improve. Again, this is basically what we were talking about. You control, you take control action about it. And this whole cycle goes on and on. So we would have a look at this as to how what do you define? What do you measure? What are the things that you're trying to look at when you're trying to do the analysis? What tools would you use? The 5 whys and so on and so forth, the root cause analysis, the fishbone diagram, and then how you can improve the processes on a continuous basis. So we'll have a look at this now. So in the context of definition, what do you define? You define the business problem. You're not defining the technical. When you talk about business problem, pretty much what we're trying to look at is how can we deliver value to our customers, to the users, and the functionality. It's not the technology, as we discussed the other day. It's not about technology. It's not about focusing on the technology alone, because the technology is a medium, is a way to deliver. It's not the end, it's the medium. So if you want to really look at the real crux of the problem, you need to understand that from the point of view of the business aspect, the functionality, and who are the stakeholders who've got the problem. So that's where you actually kind of can take the help of the fishbone, the 5 whys, ask why 5 times, so you actually get to the real root of the problem. So again, that's very important in the context of starting anything in the Agile development. So what is known now? So how do you state this business problem? What do we know now about that particular situation? What the consideration? What is currently known to us? And what are the customers? What are users thinking about it at the moment? What is their perception? So their perception is different from what you think it is. And that's why they say that what the company thinks about itself, what it stands for, is basically what it is called the identity. And what the people really think about it or perceive that the company is doing is actually called the image of the company or the brand. In fact, I did a project during my MBA days about the brand identity versus brand image of a very popular brand. I don't want to say that now, but it's a very popular brand in the whole world. So I did this exercise to actually understand whether what the company thinks, what the organization thinks as what its values, its brand equity, and all these, the kind of brand stands for. Is it exactly what the customers on the other side, the external viewpoint, is it actually aligned to that? Most often it is not, because the customers are thinking in a different way, because the identity is not matching to the image of the brand. So we need to do something to bridge that gap. So that's my project anyway. So coming to this one, what are the customers thinking about this? What are the objectives and the goals of this project, this product? What do you want to do? And then what is in the scope and what is out of scope for this piece of work? Again, very, very important. We were discussing this in greater depth in the scoping and prioritization. The last, I think, was it on, yeah, the last Tuesday and Wednesday, we were discussing that, about how scoping out is more important than scoping in. So you need to come up with the boundaries and say that this is out of this and this is in. So for that one, after all of this is done, what we call as a boss card or the terms of reference, it's a Prince2 term, but it's very widely used in pretty much all the project management kind of a thing. So it would really help you to come up with this, because it's basically says that background. What is the background? What are the objectives? What's the scope? Who are the customers? Who are the authority or the sign off? who's got the responsibility, what are the dependencies. So that's called boss card, a very valuable tool. I would suggest you can use that to your advantage. I'll share that template. I've got a template and I'll share that with you. We can perhaps go through in one of the sessions in the coming sessions about how to create this boss card for your projects. Very good for any type of work, any kind of a project, any type of product application, even small, big, doesn't matter. Having this terms of reference, that's called TOR, very, very valuable. It's a good starting point for anything. So with this one, once you create this boss card, the terms of reference, you have pretty much a great idea about what the problem is, what are the opportunities that you have, who are the stakeholders, what kind of work is required to do, what are the dependencies, right? All of these constraints, everything is actually pretty clear. What are the goals? What are the objectives in terms of the business and also the project? So all of these are pretty clear and you're specific in that. So once you do that definition, once you're clear with that, you come up with the measures of how you can assess whether in the right track or not, whether in the right direction and whether you're going in the right with the right speed or not. And that's where you come up with some kind of measures and metrics. And that's where, for example, if it's to do with a project, so the project schedule variance, effort, how difficult, what is the initial effort estimate and what's the effort, the actual effort that we are spending. And that's why we actually track the capacity, the velocity in Agile context. And then the defects, for example, the number of defects that we have got in every release, the defect density, what is it, review efficiency. All of these are different metrics that we can use, the productivity. All of these are different metrics, the measures that we can actually try and keep track of to understand how we're performing as a process, and also the product. We can assess two things. One, the process that we're following, how we're doing the things. And the second thing, we can also assess and measure the quality of the product, which is different. So product metrics are different from the project metrics. So again, or the process metrics. So we need to be clear about each of these and then put down. So that's where we discussed yesterday, the balanced business scorecard. We had a look at how you can come up with the financial, the learning and development, the internal processes and the customer, all those different dimensions, how you can come up with that and how you can measure yourself, what are kind of critical success factors, the CSFs, the key process indicators, and then the performance targets for each of them. We define that, right? So you want to increase for example, you want to increase the customer satisfaction by 60%, right? So that's this customer satisfaction is a critical success factor. And the KPI for that could be the customer retention, the rate of customer retention. And then the performance target would be, for example, if you want to retain 30% of your existing customers into the next 1 or 2 years, that is a performance target for you, the number, 30%, 20%, whatever. So again, we'll discuss these in greater detail later, but it's important for you to understand that we need to have some measures to put in place and to make sure that if you don't measure, you can't manage, right? So measures are there to make sure that you manage the processes, you manage the products, you manage your projects well. And that's why we need to have them in place. And we also need to have baselines to understand where we are now vis-a-vis where you want to go. So the expected, what is the current set of measures and what do you want to do in the next 2 years, 6 months, 2 months, and next week, right? So you need to have that. For that, we need to have the existing data sets. We can actually have some of the industry standards. We can take some of the industry standard measures and metrics. We can refer to the reports that are available, and then we can use them as a starting point if we don't have anything like that. So again, what cannot be measured cannot be managed. It's very important to have the measures. So you define, you measure, and then what you do once you have the measures in place, you start analyzing. You actually perform, you implement, you execute the project, and you analyze how we are doing, and then you come up with whether we're doing in the right direction or not. How are they measuring up in terms of the baseline metrics that we have? So to solve a problem, first go to the root of problem. That's where we talk about analysis of variance. ANOVA, statistical measure actually, it's called ANOVA, analysis of variance. And then it is also about how varied, how different it is your current product with respect to how it should be. So that's a statistical quality control, quality assurance, testing, all of these again come into picture. So how do you really go to the problem, root of the problem? You actually do a lot of different tools and techniques. You can use fishbone, you can actually use the root cause analysis. That's what is called fishbone, right? So you actually identify the main problem. To get to the main problem, you look at what kind of materials, what's the manpower required, what's the kind of money involved, how are the different processes that are really shaping up to this one, what kind of tasks are involved. So that's what you do. Again, 5 whys, again, to get to the root of the problem really helps. So that's what you try and do to come up with the analysis of this, and you come up with some kind of indicative measures to say that you're really in the right direction, or you're going a different tangent. So, and then once you do that analysis, you know pretty much where do you want to go, right? So you know the difference. You actually know where you want to go, which is the baseline, and then where you are at the moment. So which is what is the actual. So that difference, the delta between those would actually tell you what you need to do, how you need to improve, how much you need to improve, what are the different steps you need to take to get to that desired state. So that's the next step in order to improve. And for that, you need to come up with the with how you can implement the solution. What are the different ways to come up with that? How you can prioritize the specific problems. Again, going back to the scoping and the prioritization presentation that we had. Elaborate and specify in greater detail. We need to actually say that in not just saying that I want to improve this process, but actually how do you want to go about doing that? You want to deploy, you want to remove the waste. There's a lot of waste currently in the process. There's a lot of waiting time. Testers are waiting for the build to be sent to them by the developers, for instance. So how can you eliminate that? You can actually eliminate by actually having the testers, occupied by having the test plans. They can actually work on the test plans, on the test cases, even before the development team need to complete, because they're 2 different things. So based on the requirement, the testers can actually kind of start working on creating the test plans and the test cases. They don't have to wait for the build to do that. But once the build is ready, then they can apply these test cases, and they can actually execute the tests to come up with the results. So that's how you can actually reduce the waiting time, the waste in the process, right? So that's one way of approaching. That's one way to detail out how you want to address the problem. And you can create different options. There's no one size fits all. You can actually come up with, depending on the situation, depending on the need, you can come out with different options, different ideas to address the problems that you have. So you can engage the team and have brainstorming, brainwriting. You can encourage all kinds of different, kind of these workshops, these kind of techniques and tools to come up with ways and means to solve and address those problems. So that's the whole idea of having this improvement. And is it just enough to do improvement, coming up with ideas? You need to implement them, right? So that's where you need to implement them and see whether they're working or not. And that's the next step, to see whether the results are in the right way or not. So you need to continuously assess these results and seeing, based on the outcomes, are we in the right track? Are they leading us to where we should go or where we want to go, right? So that's the whole idea about making sustainable. So again, control is all about that, making sure that this is actually not just done in 2 weeks time or 3 weeks time, but how can we do it in the next 5 sprints, next 10 sprints? How can we kind of institutionalize this and internalize this across all the teams, not just one team? So that's the whole idea about having the control mechanism in place. So you need to continuously assess on a periodic basis, every month, every sprint. At the end of every sprint, make sure that the team is aware of what should be done, where they are in the context of this, and then take steps to make sure that they are in line with the expectations. So control is a continuous process. It's not one-time activity. Again, like what we were doing, planning is a continuous process as much as control is. So these are 2 ends of the same coin, if you say. So you plan, you do something, you control whether you can understand whether your plans are working, and then make sure that the outcome and the output is actually routed back to the planning. So planning and control both have to go hand